Hello there. In this video we're going to show you how you can use one of a range of files that are available in Fluid Designer for 3D printing, which enable you to quickly create pendants based on different styles. And in this one we're going to use an Enneper curve object. So if you start Fluid Designer up, if you go to the Pendants folder, which we already are, if we just scroll down the screen, you can see there's a lot of objects here, and quite a lot of these, not quite all of them, but quite a lot of these objects can be manipulated and used in a similar way to what I'm going to show you here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can use this one, which is an Enneper curve. So if I just drag and drop that object onto the workspace, and I'll just switch on screencast keys. So this object is a curve. It's an Enneper curve. If we look at the properties panel and show the main information, you can see the actual size of it is about 13 millimeters, well, 14 millimeters approximately by 14 millimeters, and 1 millimeter thick. So in real sense, it's quite small. That's the real size of the object, of the curve. If we go over to the curve data information here, this indicates that our object is a curve, as does the fact that in the outliner window it also has got the similar curve icon there. And if we remove the bevel object, the cross-section diameter 1 millimeter, if we remove that, you can see that we can get back to the raw Enneper curve. And if I press the tab key on the keyboard, you'll see all the different control points that make up this Enneper curve. Now if you wanted to actually create this object yourself, there are instructions in the help panel over here to get you going in the right direction. And essentially this curve is being created actually from a mesh. It's being created using an XYZ math function and these mathematical equations as displayed over here in the help window. You don't actually need to worry about doing that because the curve's already been created for you and sized in such a way that it can be used in jewellery design or other designs as well, not just jewellery. So if we put the bevel object back in, the cross-section diameter of 1 millimeter, that is a circular cross-section, so it's rounded. What can we do with this? Well, if we just go to view and top view, and I'm just scrolling the center mouse button towards me so I can see what's going on. If I go to modifiers, you'll see that there's a couple of modifiers being created here. One says set the columns, one says set the rows. These are actually array modifiers. And I've just changed the names in these to set the rows and set the columns. So if I open up that modifier, set the rows, if I change the count, you can see that what I get is 3 copies of the original Enneper curve, and they're overlapping. And if I look in the main information icon, you can see that my Y dimension has increased from about 14 millimeters to 30 millimeters. The Y dimension is the green arrow, so this is approximately 30 millimeters or 3 centimeters tall. So you know, you can if you put your ruler up against the screen, you can actually measure that, and then you can see what the real size of this object is rather than the zoomed in magnified size that we're looking at the moment. So the count is 3. And we get this interesting pattern. And if we change the relative offset, notice that we can change the pattern. I'm changing the offset down to 0.2 there. As I increase it, you can see the pattern changes again. Now, once we get up to 1, these objects are not touching now. If you try to 3D print this, you get 3 separate objects there. And certainly once you go above 1, that's what will happen. So you do need to have this relative offset value less than 1, but you can play around with it until you get a a style of object that you actually like. Now I'm going to switch that back down to 1 again, and I'm just going to move the window over to the left there. I just held down the shift key and just dragged it over to the left. If I click on this one here and open up the modifier to set the columns, this is also an array modifier, and if I click on count this time, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, notice I've got a circular pattern this time, and the size of it now, well, it's about 40 millimeters by 40 millimeters, 4 centimeters square. Oops, I want to go back to the modifiers one. So you can see that you get a pattern there, and if we change the relative offset again, notice this time the pattern comes in on itself, and all the time we get a different type of object, and all these should be 3D printable. Now, what is causing it to rotate? Because it didn't rotate when we had set the rows. Well, we've got this option here ticked, Object Offset, and we've got something called Angular Rotation. Well, if I remove that, I've got no rotation now, and I've got a count of 6. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I've got an offset of 0.7. So the offset brings it closer together, or widens it apart. But when I select an object offset, an angular rotation, we get it rotating there. An angular rotation is a special object that has been created for you in this file. And if we look over here in the outliner panel, you can see the object, and it's actually it's a little bit of a strange object. It's called an empty, and we only really use this object to help to rotate things, or I only use it for that reason. And so with the angular rotation object highlighted here in the outliner window, if I click on I, show the main information icon, you'll see that we've got this value here of 60 degrees. Everything else is set to 0, only worry about the one that's been changed. Now, in a circle, you have 360 degrees. Half of 360 is 180. A third of 360 is 120. A quarter of 360 is 90. There are certain values that you should enter in here and values that you shouldn't enter. So 30 degrees is okay. We'd need 12 copies of this Enneper curve to complete the circle at 30 degrees. 45 degrees is okay. 60 degrees is okay, as we've seen, that's what it was set at. 72 degrees is okay because we get 5 copies. And similarly 90, 120, 180 and 360, they all work as the Z rotation. So if you want to change those values, try and stick to multiples values that go into 360 degrees, because that's what you're creating here, a circle. Now if we go back to the Enneper curve itself, remembering that we've changed this from 60 to 72. Now at 60 we had 6 objects going around here. Our setting is still 6. We've actually only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 copies now. The 6th copy is actually sitting on top of the original. Sorry, this is the original one, isn't it? The first, the one at the center of the screen here. This is the original object. So by having a count of 6, we've gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 6th one is exactly on top of the original. You must be very careful that you don't do that. If you have a copy here exactly on top of the first copy, when you try and 3D print this, you'll come up with all sorts of problems. So we really need to take this count down to 5, and notice nothing's changed. So if I change from 5 to 6, there's no change. It's only when I go below 5 that our circle is not complete. So you've got to be very careful that you don't go any extra 7, 8. You will have real problems trying to 3D print this. You must have the count just completing the circle. So 5 times 72 degrees, which is what the rotation was here, 5 times 72 is 360 degrees. You must ensure that you stick to that count, no more, otherwise you'll have problems. If you don't want an angular rotation, you can either remove the tick from the box or you can just delete the angular rotation. Now if you set the columns at 5 and the rows at 2, notice you'll get a different type of pattern as well. Okay, so with this Enneper curve file in Fluid Designer for 3D printing, you can see there's lots and lots of different types of pendant that you can actually create just by changing the count or the relative offset, or by introducing an angular rotation. Once you've actually got a pendant that you're happy with, and that's the style that you want to 3D print, remember in Fluid Designer, don't go to File and Save. We always suggest you go to File and Export it, because it's the Wavefront OBJ file that is the printable file format. So if we go to Export, and then I like to save them to the desktop, and I'll just delete the word master, so it's an Enneper curve pendant that I've created there, and I just export that object to the desktop. And I'll just let that save. Okay. Now if we just go to View and Top View, in addition to changing these values over here in the Properties panel, another thing that we can do, also we could change the thickness of this object. We could make it a square cross section, for example, as well as a rounded cross section. But in addition to that, if we just go to View and Top View, and if I now go into Edit mode, so if I press the Tab key on the keyboard and go into Edit mode, we can make some further changes to this Enneper curve. So if I just zoom in there, and if I do C on the keyboard and go for Circle Select, I'm just going to select 4 control points there, and to cancel the Circle Select I press the Escape key on the keyboard. If I now drag that up, you can see that I can change the appearance of my Enneper curve. And at the moment there's what's called proportional editing on, which is this circle, and if I move the center mouse button, I can limit what is being changed, what is being moved proportionally. So the bigger the circle, the more of my original object moves. If you look at the bottom of the Enneper curve at the moment, outside of the circle, it's not moving. The bigger I make the circle, the more of my object will move. So you could play around with this and change the appearance of your Enneper curve. And if I press the Tab key to come out of Edit mode, and notice that appearance has been reflected in all versions of this, because we've got a count of 3. So it's not just my original one that's been changed, all 3 parts of it have been changed. So that's another way of actually making a personalised item for 3D, jewellery item for 3D printing. Okay, so that's that's it for this. But oh yes, just to reiterate what I said at the very beginning, not every single object in the pendants folder can be used in the same way as the Enneper curve, but certainly a lot of these objects here, Celtic knots, Greek style, conical rows, curves galore, flower patterns, all of these can be used in a very similar way to the Enneper curve which I've just shown you. So lots and lots of different patterns can be created with a range of these objects here. Okay, so that's it. That's it for this particular video. Thank you.